In order to get the list of the videos appear on the screen, we need to fetch some data from an API. Previously, you would do this via getStaticProps or getServerSideProps, or perhaps a library like React Query. In the app directory, to fetch data, we're going to use a combination of async server components together with native fetch API extended by Next.js and React. In the codebase, we're first going to define an interface for the video object. We're going to turn the component into an async component, and we're going to use the fetch function to fetch the data from the API. Then we're going to map over the videos that we've got. We're going to import link. We're going to include a link to the video detail and display the video title, author, and the number of views. We can see our code is working in the browser, but before we proceed, let's spend some time and explore the fetch function. When you use the fetch function in Next.js, you are in fact using a special fetch function extended by Next.js and React. So how exactly do React and Next.js extend the fetch API? Let's start with React. React provides automatic request deduplication. What does that mean? Let's say you have three components making the very same API call. With deduplication in place, React will only make one call instead. Let's shift our attention to how Next.js extends the fetch API. And it does that by letting us define how the fetch API is going to interact with a server-side cache. Natively, the cache option in the fetch function defines how a fetch request will interact with browser's HTTP cache. Next.js extends this using the cache option to define how the request will interact with server cache. Bear in mind that the fetch request occurs on the server, and also adds a special next revalidate option. Let's explore these options in more detail, as understanding this is key to understanding how data fetching works in the app directory. The first option is force cache, which is going to be the default one in most scenarios. This is similar to getStaticProps function and could be summarized as cache everything until manually invalidated. How exactly does this work? So let's say you have a user, you have Next.js cache running on server, perhaps Vercel, and an API. Let's focus on the communication between Next.js cache and an API that happens during build time. When Next.js builds your application, it will send requests to an API as it pre-renders your pages, and then it will cache the responses it receives. Once your application has been built and your Next.js instance is running, when a user visits one of the pages that uses fetch function with force cache option, Next.js will return the response from its cache without making any requests to your API. Force cache option is also the option that our fetch request that fetches the videos uses. As you can see in our API logs, Next.js fires requests as it's building the app. However, once the application is running, no API requests are being made and everything is being served from the cache. Another cache option for the fetch function is no store. This can be the default one in some scenarios, and I will talk about this later in the video. Whenever a user visits a page that uses the fetch function with the cache no store option, Next.js is going to create an API request and then it's going to send this page to the user without storing anything in the cache. Hence, the cache no store option is kind of similar to how getServerSideProps function works in the pages directory and could be summarized as cache nothing. The final option you can provide to this special fetch function is next revalidate with the revalidation period in seconds. We'll use 60. When building your app, specifying this option is going to yield the same results as specifying cache force cache. This means that Next.js will fire API requests as it pre-renders pages using fetch function with this option in place, and it will cache the responses. What's more interesting is how your application is going to behave in runtime. The way it's going to behave is going to be different based on whether your revalidation period, in our case 60 seconds, has already elapsed or not. So before a revalidation period of 60 seconds has elapsed, Next.js is going to behave in the same way as specifying cache first cache. That means that incoming requests are going to be served directly from the Next.js cache without hitting the API. After our 60-second revalidation period has elapsed, it's going to behave slightly differently. When a user visits the page, they are still gonna get the response back from the cache. However, this response might contain stale data. What's gonna happen right after the response has been made is that Next.js is gonna query the API for fresh data, it's gonna evict the old items from the cache, and it's gonna replace it with the fresh data it just received. This way, all the subsequent requests are gonna be served fresh data from the cache, and after another 60 seconds, when a request comes in, the whole background revalidation process is gonna be repeated. Now that we've established a good understanding of the fetch function, we can implement the video detail page, and we're soon going to learn about generate static params function.